Picture a country where the sun rises like it always does. People open shops, someone boils tea, someone jokes about the price of beans. And then, within days, roadblocks appear. Neighbors start checking neighbors. A piece of paper, an identity card, becomes a life or death coin toss. This is not a story about ancient tribal hatred. It's a story about how fast a society can be hijacked when fear is organized, when propaganda becomes a soundtrack, and when the world watches and debates vocabulary. And yes, today's video needs a warning. We're going to discuss genocide, not with graphic imagery, not for shock entertainment, but because history has teeth, and it bites the present when we stop paying attention. Rwanda, 1994. The speed of collapse. 1. The shock factor. Between early April and mid-July 1994, an estimated hundreds of thousands of people, primarily Tutsi, and also many moderate Hutu, were killed in roughly 100 days. Let that number sit in your chest for a second. The shock isn't only the violence, it's the speed. It's the way daily life can continue in one neighborhood, while in another, the unthinkable becomes policy. And here's one of the most chilling truths. Much of this didn't require advanced weapons. It required something more common than guns: permission. Permission granted by authorities, amplified by media, enforced at roadblocks, and normalized by repetition. There's a bitter irony in how humans can invent rocket science and still be hacked by slogans. Any humor today is aimed only at systems, bureaucracy, administration, the machinery of evil pretending to be normal, never at victims. 2. The trail map. Here's the trail we'll follow, so we can go deep without getting lost. How identity became a weapon. How propaganda made violence feel normal. How neighbor turned against neighbor. How the world hesitated, and what never again actually demands. Let's begin. 3. How identity became a weapon. Rwanda is often called the land of 1,000 hills. It sounds poetic, but hills can also hide things: fear, rumor, and the quiet work of organizing violence. To understand 1994, you have to understand something painfully modern. Bureaucracy can be weaponized. Ethnic categories like Hutu and Tutsi were not just social labels. Over time, through history and political power, they became hardened identities. And when a society's identity system becomes rigid, it can be turned into a sorting machine. Who belongs? Who doesn't? Who lives? Who doesn't? That's why genocides are not only explosions of rage, they are also processes, paperwork, lists, coordination, chains of command. Evil loves a clipboard, because a clipboard looks like work, and work looks like normal. 4. The match. April 1994. On April 6, 1994, the plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was shot down. This event is widely recognized as the trigger that preceded the rapid escalation into mass killing. By the morning of April 7th, the country crossed a threshold. In many areas, coordinated slaughter began. And here comes one of the most haunting parts. When killing starts, time itself changes. Hours become a lifetime. Days become history. 5. Propaganda. When words become weapons. Genocide doesn't begin with machetes. It begins with stories. Stories that say, they are the problem. They are coming for you. They are not fully human. In Rwanda, radio was powerful, especially Radio Télévision Libre des Mille Collines, often called RTLM. It played a major role in spreading propaganda and incitement. And here's the crucial part. Propaganda doesn't just create hate, it creates social permission, a world where violence feels like duty, where refusing feels like betrayal. And propaganda is rarely just screaming. It can be jokes, music, casual chatter, the voice that sounds like your neighbor, your uncle, your trusted guy on the radio. That's why it works. It doesn't feel like a lecture, it feels like community. The terrifying part is how community vibes can deliver moral poison, like handing someone a cup labeled tea when it's actually gasoline. 6. Neighbor against neighbor. One of the hardest truths of 1994, violence wasn't carried out only by soldiers. Militias like the Rwanda, alongside elements of state forces and local authority structures, were central, but ordinary people were also pulled in. So how does a neighbor become a hunter? Usually, not all at once. Fear is planted. If we don't act, we die. Targets are named. That group is the threat. Refusal becomes dangerous. If you don't join, you're with them. Violence becomes a test. Prove you belong. And then comes the most tragic collapse. Not just institutions failing, but trust failing. Door to door, family to family. Survivors often say the pain wasn't only loss, it was betrayal. Discovering that hello and good morning can be masks. 7. The world hesitates. Now we widen the lens. The United Nations had a peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, UNAMIR, but its mandate and resources were limited, and as the crisis exploded, the Security Council reduced the mission's strength in April 1994. Here is where never again becomes more than a slogan, because recognizing evil isn't enough. You have to move fast enough to disrupt it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. International systems move at the speed of meetings. Genocide moves at the speed of mobs. Paperwork versus panic. Deliberation versus bloodshed. Diplomacy versus machetes. If evil ever wrote a business plan, it might include one line. Step 1. Wait for committees. 8. How it ended. By July 1994, the genocide had largely ended as the Rwandan Patriot Front, the RPF, took control of much of the country, including Kigali. This did not end suffering. There were massive displacements, deep trauma, long political consequences. But it marked the end of the concentrated period known as the genocide against the Tutsi. 9. Never again. Justice, memory, questions. After 1994, the question wasn't only how did this happen, it was what now? Internationally, the UN created the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the ICTR, in November 1994 to prosecute serious crimes. Inside Rwanda, the number of cases was overwhelming, so Rwanda later used community-based justice processes, widely known as gacaca, to handle a vast number of genocide-related cases. But never again isn't only about courts. It's about memory, education, protecting truth from denial and distortion. Never again fails when early warning is ignored, incitement is dismissed as just speech, institutions move too slowly, and the world waits for perfect certainty while people die. 10. The real lesson. Genocide is a technology. Here's the deepest rabbit hole, and we'll keep the trail clear. Genocide is not chaos. It's a technology, a repeatable method of social destruction. Not high-tech, but systematic. You define an enemy. You broadcast it daily. You reward participation. You punish refusal. You isolate victims. And you create the illusion that violence is normal and resistance is dangerous. The frightening part is that this system doesn't require Rwanda. It can run anywhere humans are, exhausted,
afraid, polarized, and convinced their neighbor is a threat. That's why Rwanda isn't just a tragedy over there, it's a warning about what over here can become. 11. The trail recap. Let's recap the trail. Identity became a weapon. Propaganda turned fear into duty. Neighbors turned against neighbors through pressure and permission. The world hesitated while the killing moved fast. And never again is not a phrase, it's a discipline. 12. Closing. If you're still watching, you're doing something important. You're refusing amnesia. Because the opposite of never again isn't simply again. The opposite is forgetting and letting the same patterns return, wearing new clothes. So here's a question to
sit with. If propaganda can turn a neighbor into an enemy, what practices turn a neighbor back into a neighbor? If you want more episodes where we dissect the hidden machinery of history, how societies rise, fracture, and recover, subscribe. And in the comments, answer this. What do you think is the earliest warning sign that a society is starting to slide?